Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News, where we're back with our Evil Elite series where I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. As the Great Awakening is really picking up pace, as a lot of the Trump supporters just realize that everything they were promised to be delivered just isn't coming out, and the excuses are starting to just get ridiculous now, which is well summarized in this meme, the latest being told that there's no Epstein list. So let's get into more of all this drama and plenty more of what's been happening around the world the past couple of weeks. But Trump's, denied the list exists, saying it's a Democratic host. Remember, he ran on this promise that he was going to release it on day one. But thankfully, a lot of the big podcasters and influencers are covering this and pushing back, even in the press conferences. Candace Owens has started her series on YouTube, a deep dive into the Epstein files. And as I've said on numerous occasions, why this is so important is it really is the key to exposing who runs the world and this global satanic pedophile blackmail network. So Grok 4 actually went unhinged for a few hours this week and really started to tell the truth on a number of important issues here. Plenty of screenshots circulating still from that time period before they updated it. And that really just shows you who's creating these AI models and who runs big tech and who runs the world and who's suppressing free speech, because it's absolutely clear to anyone that's done any amount of research the grip that a certain group of people have, not only on American politics, but basically all Western politics. Australia's well and truly captured, which we'll get into, but basically nearly the entire world now, and we're going to get talk towards the final plans in the AI grid. But after being told that there's no such thing as the Epstein list, we then had members of Congress voting to block the release of a list. And people are waking up to the fact that all of Trump's cabinet and people close to him all have these ties, to Israel, and these coincidences. Howard Lutnick, who's the Secretary of Commerce now, didn't show up to the World Trade Center during 9/11, and his business partner who insured the Twin Towers right before they fell and got the massive payout, who also didn't happen to go to work that day. It's all just so obvious once you look into it, that they're all tied together, and he actually lived next door to Epstein as well. So thankfully there are people pushing back. This is Senator Ron Wyden talking about how there is an Epstein file down at the Treasury Department, and more of these whistleblowers are hopefully going to step forward. And if we continue to put pressure, hopefully we actually get all this come out. But it's going to come from the people and independent researchers and podcasters and that type of thing. But don't forget that Australia is well and truly tied into all of this and a testbed for the New World Order, as I've been speaking about. But this is an independent member, Anne Bressington, from way back in 2013, talking about Agenda 21, the Club of Rome, the New World Order, the depopulation agenda, global warming, all this stuff that the globalists were going to push on us. These are articles from back in 1995 with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, guests of honour in the Sydney Harbour cruise for these billionaires. And it's a lot of these people in positions of power, and we're starting to see a lot of low-level, criminals being called out, and this stuff's coming out in the media more and more, which is really worrying. If you've got kids in daycare and that type of thing, some of the stuff that's been coming out recently, and again, being granted bail, a lot of the legal system seems to protect these kind of people, which is just insane. And again, because a lot of them unfortunately are in on all this as well. But this is another worrying article here about foreign students coming into these early education programs, because it's one of the ways to fast track your permanent residency. So another concerning article there. But I wanted to mention this one as well. This is all tied into this agenda and this LGBTQ drag queens at, daycares and primary schools and this type of thing. So this is a book that was nominated for the Prime Minister's Literacy Awards, teaching kids as young as 8 how to do these, acts that should be left for adults. If you're an adult, you're free to do what you want. But again, this is just all disgusting, and it all ties together once you see through the matrix why they're pushing this on our kids. So more higher-ups, Commonwealth Bank executive who allegedly was procuring underage children, found dead after this news came out. So obviously we want justice, and we want all these accusations to be proven before people get charged, and we do want to see this. But this stuff seems to be coming out on a daily basis in the news cycle now. And there was also a 17-year-old Crown witness who was murdered just 3 days before he was due to give evidence against an Australian pedophile ring. So, why doesn't he have police protection? This is the kind of stuff we've seen all around the world, where whistleblowers and people that are due to testify seem to fall off balconies or, seem to die in these suspicious circumstances. So we've got to keep the pressure on. This is another suspicious death over in France. So this is the surgeon who announced Bridget McConn's transgender transformation was found dead in Paris, falling from a balcony. Once again, he was due to give some interviews on what he knew about this transgender surgery and just how many of our elites, it's coming out that they are transgender and that type of thing, celebrities as well. So I like this tweet here that really sums it up, as I said at the start. This is the master key that unlocks the answer to how not just America, but the world has been systematically destroyed from within by a certain group of people. And Tucker Carlson's fast becoming one of the largest podcasters and voices in the world. Maybe he's not perfect on every issue, but at least he's calling this stuff out and really tackling it head on, as I mentioned with Candace before. And if these people with millions and millions of followers are doing these deep dives, and they're going to find out all the stuff that we all did if you've been down the rabbit hole for a number of years now, exposing all this. So you've got, the Israelis, people in positions of power coming out and saying, there was no connection of Epstein to Mossad and blah, blah, blah. But, it's completely obvious, as I've mentioned before. So David Icke is one who's been calling this out, these satanic ritual abuse and these pedophile networks for 30 years now. And what was shocking to him was just the sheer scale of involvement of the rich and famous, not just politicians, but, celebrities, musicians, bankers, all the things that I've just discussed here. So more and more people are starting to take the people that have been saying these things that were pretty fringe conspiracies years ago, they all seem to be finally coming to light. And it's not just David Icke and conspiracy theorists, it's actually people in positions of power. I've played this clip before, but this is former CIA confession here talking about what they're actually doing to these kids in these tunnels, in these basements where they're being bred and sold, as well as, the adrenochrome and all that other hideous stuff that I've touched on in previous episodes as well. So tying this into why, Trump's obviously captured or whatnot, it appears that way. And I spoke about how a lot of the mega followers have been really disappointed. One of the things I've said all along in this series was don't align yourself with, with people and celebrities and whatever. Don't fall into that cult system. Align yourself with what people are actually doing, their philosophies, watch what they do, not just what they're saying, and align yourself with the belief systems. So Trump's obviously backflipped on a lot of the stuff he said he was going to do, and now he's passed this big, beautiful bill, and it's pumping all this money into AI, digital surveillance, this totalitarian technocracy that I've been warning about as well. Once again, it all ties deeply to Israel that run a lot of these companies, to Palantir and Peter Thiel, and we've signed this agreement to cooperate with AI and consolidates all the data of Americans and the world, really, and it will now be shared with Israel. And this is the CEO of Palantir. So I've spoken about Peter Thiel as well, but these people are they're lunatics, they're crazy. So this is an interview he recently did saying that he would like drones to spray fentanyl-laced urine on anyone that opposes him. This is the AI tech that's been used to drone and kill civilians and people throughout Gaza and all the genocide that's happening there. But it seems that they're tying the way for Trump to maybe be the bad guy or the fall guy, and pave the way for, Elon's spoken about this third political party because both the current parties are, left-wing, right-wing, the same bird kind of idea. But this third party is all going to be based on this technocracy and AI. And, the problem, reaction, solution, they're going to get the masses and use the media and as always the brainwashing techniques to get people to beg for this. And this all ties into some of the immigration stuff, which I'm going to get to as well. But continuing on, we've all seen, the genocide that's been taking place in Gaza for a number of years now, but this is part of that greater Israel project, which I've covered on before. So we're now got Israel raining bombs on the capital of Syria, targeting civilian neighborhoods and that type of thing. So more innocent people dying in a city that has stood for 11,000 years. And as David Icke shares here, and I've shown this map before, this is the Greater Israel Plan, that they want to take over these, the resources, these trade corridors, and they believe that this land is rightfully theirs because of, one version of one book that some people wrote a number of years ago. It's crazy that these people can believe that gives them the right to do all this stuff and kill innocent people. So while this is all happening, these two, Trump and Netanyahu, having a bit of a circle jerk here, talking about how he's the greatest man in the world and nominating Trump for the Peace Prize and all this sort of thing, just as we saw with Obama getting the Peace Prize, who dropped more bombs than any other president in US history. This is all part of the satanic inversion, where the media will tell you how great this is and it's all for peace, and really it's just war and death and destruction. And this is a reminder that this is the way that the people in positions of power think. So these are the only two countries that voted against making food a human right. I've spoken about how they're going to come after water next, the privatization of water, and all this type of thing as well. Just these people, the way they think, the psychopathic nature is starting to become obvious to so many. So over to the Netherlands here, and I spoke about this last year, where complete media blackout on this one, but Bill Gates, Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, due to stand trial for crimes against humanity, all the stuff that was in the jabs that they knew, told us that it was 100% effective, and turns out it was 0% effective, and what was really in it with, the nanotech and all this other stuff that's coming out now. And I've actually got a doctor coming on who's been exposing this nanotech and doing the blood samples under the microscope and all that soon. I'll be having him on the show. But this is one of the Dutch lawyers that's prosecuting Bill Gates actually being arrested and facing involuntary euthanasia. So this is, if you're a conspiracy theorist, or this reminds me of the old days where if you just went against the government and they put you in a mental asylum, it's starting to look that way. Anyone that goes against the official narrative is going to be deemed a conspiracy theorist. If you watch this video, they talk about some of these re-education facilities and the digital mind washing that they're going to be doing to actually, make you a subservient citizen and go along with the official narrative. And if you don't, maybe even, involuntary euthanasia might be up. So this is crazy stuff, again, that we have to push back against and wake people up. This is an amazing documentary speech by Dr. Mike Yeadon, who is the former vice president of Pfizer, who's now turned whistleblower. And he said, before 2020, he just thought everything was cool and normal. And then he's become an advocate, talking out about the nanotech, what was really in the shots, digital ID, the global warming climate change myth that's all part of this control system they want to push for carbon credits. So this was an absolute must-watch called Final Warning. You'll find it on a number of platforms. Wherever you watch and consume your content, you should be able to watch that one. And this is the Sustainable Development, World Economic Forum, UN, all these NGOs. This is what they kind of tell us. And once you see through all the BS, this is, the actual New World Order goals that they want to push to enslave humanity. And in just 5 days' time of recording, I think it's actually tomorrow, that the World Health Organization takes complete control of health policy in all these countries that have signed on, including Australia. And, none of us voted for this. None of us want this after how extreme the lockdowns and the mandates were here in Australia. So I'm kind of wondering, what they're going to pull now that they do have the power. What could be the next, fake pandemic, or, vaccination certificates, IDs, all this type of stuff now that they do have control. Pretty scary. So let's get into some of the weather modifications. So this was, these crazy floods. You would have seen some of these clips floating around, just how quickly these floodwaters rose 20, 30, 40 feet in some of these places in Texas. And this was the CEO, 25-year-old, of this weather modification startup called Rainmaker. So this was funded by, once again, Peter Thiel, same people as always, saying that, we're doing cloud seeding in the area. But it had nothing to do with it. It's just a coincidence. So once again, if we get these people with, Russell Brands and the Candace Owens and Tuckers of the world covering this, that this stuff is very real, it is happening, and it's not a coincidence. And it all ties into what we saw with the fires and these floods, where it was paved the way for these 15-minute smart cities that are already signed on. The insurance companies cancel your insurance. There's even clips going around of people showing that BlackRock were actually offering people to buy their homes ahead of time before this happened, saying, we know your insurance has been cancelled, we're happy to pay market price. And now it's all coming to true. Another conspiracy comes true, where they're going to build these box apartments, low-income apartments, 15-minute smart cities in the places where these natural disasters that have been caused by these weather weapons are taking place. So this all ties into what we're continuing to see, to more and more parts of nature being off limits to Aussies, and I'm sure this is happening in other places around the world, which is really sad for those of us that love nature. But this is a fantastic video by Makia Freeman of the Freedom Articles, talking about the similarities to what we've seen here in California. So this is the map of where the wildfires went, and this is the map of where they want to build this high-speed rail. And you can see it's almost a perfect overlay. But this is very similar to what happened in Australia. So this is the location of the Aussie bushfires that we had, and this is the location of where they wanted to build the high-speed rail in Australia. So we have to continue to expose this stuff and wake people up that this is all a very real phenomenon. So this also ties into the UN pacts that have been made in Australia, where Albo was tasked to get Australia to at least 80% under native title. So once again, a lot of truly Aboriginal people that are awake to this know that it's kind of, they're being used as this guise for, we need to protect this area and this ancient XYZ, but it's actually all part of this plan for the the government and BlackRocks of the world, and just to keep people out of nature and to make less and less land available to force everyone into these 15-minute cities. Also with the farmland, we're seeing a lot of these weather events, and it's all been blamed on climate change, but this is where the farmers are being strained with these droughts and floods, and reducing the food supply, pushing up the price of food, all part of this playbook to take away our freedoms. And just like Stalin called farmers enemies of the people before starving millions of Russians, the World Economic Forum is now waging these war on these farmers, and thankfully we see huge protests and the farmers pushing back across Europe and that type of thing. So let's get into some of these immigration stats and what is going on. So $38 billion export turns out to be Australian cash. So we've got all these migrants that are supposed to be coming in, and people say, we need these skilled migrants and whatever, but they've $38 billion of remittances. So this is money that's been sucked out of the economy and just being sent back home. On top of all that, half of the recent refugees we've taken into Australia are on unemployment benefits and can't speak English, and a lot of them have these long-term health conditions. So it's taxpayers that are funding all this in a cost of living crisis when unemployment is now ticking up. It is just insane that this is happening. We're also starting to see these become daily headlines where, a lot of these immigrants are doing these violent crimes, rapes and whatever, and then being let out on bail, just like we've seen across Europe in recent years. And some of these stories are just crazy to the extent that this is happening. And then the judges, once again, I've spoken about the judicial system, and a lot of police and positions of power are all kind of in on this, or guilty of a lot of this themselves. And this is why it continues to get let through, and just letting people off with things like frustration that comes with the migrant experiences. It's just not good enough. But this is a really important point, because there's plenty of migrants that are beautiful people that just want a better life, families and whatever, but it seems to be the radicalized ones that are disproportionately causing these violent crimes and performing these acts. But there's no point getting angry at these groups of people. You have to remember that there's another layer to this. Who is behind this? These people, it's the politicians and whatever that are engineering all this and flooding or bombing these countries in the Middle East and forcing these people to go to the West to then cause all this tension. And then the media ramps it up. drives this division, causes this hate. And this is exactly what they want. They want this division and chaos with the destruction of society. So it's important to keep that in mind, that a lot of these people aren't bad people. The media is going to ramp this up to try and cause, riots and hate. But ultimately, it's the government and the really higher up that have engineered all this. So it's really important to remember that as well. So in Britain, it came out this week, they've secretly given asylum to 24,000 Afghan soldiers and their families, costing, billions of dollars. But Australia is also doing this. And, this is an unfortunate statistic that Afghanistan is at the top of the list here for these sexual assaults by nationality. So this is kind of what we've seen in Europe, where the number of these violent crimes is nearly tenfolded in the space of 20 odd years here. This is all starting to play out in Australia, and it's really sad, particularly given, the homelessness, the cost of living and everything else. And it's all by design. So Australia now has 5 cities in the top 15 of the most unaffordable in the world. And I think this is how it's all going to play out here as we see this rise in violent crimes and all that type of thing. This is how they're going to get that problem action solution to tell the citizens that we need digital ID, mass surveillance, 15-minute cities for your safety. And so obviously this is all coming in for social media on December 10th if we don't push back and wake enough people up in time, and everything now to even Google. So it will basically be impossible to use the internet. They want to make it impossible. Obviously, you can get around this with a VPN, and I'll talk about that more in future episodes as we get closer to the date, how to get around all that. But yeah, it's just so obvious now that Australia is being used for the testbed for all this stuff. This was a fantastic doco as well that I just wanted to mention about 5G from CHD TV, where these Swedish scientists and researchers gathered plenty of evidence and documented these effects from everything from 2G all the way up, and just saying that 5G is a whole nother level of threat, bombarding the human body with this radiation. And so many people, since we had COVID and we had these 5G towers erected worldwide, particularly in cities and the dense population areas, that people are constantly feeling tired and getting sick and having these headaches and all this type of thing from this radiation that these scientists have clearly showed does have an effect on our bodies. I want to finish with a bit of a positive here. So this was a group of Aussie scientists finding that honeybee venom can destroy 100% of these breast cancer cells within an hour without harming healthy cells. So once again, nature giving us the solutions here rather than big pharma. Martin and I are going to be actually doing a video, because I know a lot of this is doom and gloom, but talking all about the solutions to avoid all this and get around it and not be sucked into this system. So I'm probably going to air that one Sunday night. And this was just another reason to get into crypto or gold or silver, where Aussie banks are now freezing customer accounts for mean comments online. So guys, if you haven't got into crypto yet, if you don't know how to protect your wealth with Bitcoin and all that sort of thing, you can head over to nuggetsnews.com.au. We're doing a lot of this for our premium members, and particularly our high net worth clients, designing a plan on how to survive what is coming in the next few years. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Share these videos around with other people that might not be as awake as you. Smash that like button, leave us a comment, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.